What's going on, Ball of Love and Brewer fans? Welcome to Brew Crew Tuesday. I am your host, Tyler. You can find me at Tyler Kurth and find my writing at Reviewing the Brew. On the other side there in his swaggerish pecker hat is Trevor. You can find him on Twitter at Bender_Trevor. He writes for Dairyland Express about the Packers, Brewers, and the Bucks. As every Tuesday, we're here to talk about our beloved Milwaukee Brewers. And with the rather not much news to talk about, I decided to expand upon something that we talked about a little bit in our last podcast. We talked about the stockpiling of left-handed pitchers that the Brewers are doing, and I just decided I wanted to dive a little bit further into that, see how they compare against some of the rest of the league. So I just wanted to back up first to like the earlier part of the last decade, or middle half anyway, when the Brewers had no lefties. And that shift really came in about 2019. In that year's draft, they picked up 7 left-handed pitchers in the first 17 rounds. So that was the year they got Ethan Small and Antone Kelly in rounds 1 and 2, Nick Bennett in round 6, and then just a bunch more after that. And now, as we are sitting here evaluating the Brewers' top 30 prospect list, there are 4 left-handed pitchers in that top 30. They are Small, Kelly, Ashby, and then Clayton Andrews, who also just happens to be a two-way player as well. So when you compare this against the rest of the league, there are just 5 teams that have more left-handed pitching prospects in their top 30 than the Brewers. That is the Braves and Rockies with 5, the Orioles and Cubs with 6, and then the Phillies with the most at 7. So taking that in for a moment, Trevor, do you find it surprising that the Brewers have 5 teams ahead of them? Is it just about right, or do you think they'd be lower on this list?
Well, I will be honest with you, Tyler. I really don't know. I don't know what's normal for MLB pipelines I don't know how many they're supposed to have, how many they should have in that top 30 list. But, having 4 promising, not that they're going to make an impact at the MLB level necessarily, but 4 promising prospects that are left-handed pitchers. And there are still some more promising prospects, I think, lower in the Brewers organization as well. We saw a little bit of Angel Perdomo. He's not on the prospect list. Leo Crawford, we talked about in our last podcast. There's some other guys that are left-handed pitchers that are exciting, but the main 3 right now that are really, really exciting is Ethan Small, Antone Kelly, and Aaron Ashby. I'm excited to see any and all of those pitchers as soon as possible. But also I love two-way players, and I love the fact that the Brewers actually have one, and that definitely makes me happy that we have someone like that.
Yeah, that definitely makes Clayton Andrews really intriguing. So it'd be interesting to watch if he kind of favors one more than the other as he's progressing here. But you mentioned our top, we're going to call them 3, in Small, Kelly, and Ashby, as they're all in the top 10 in the Brewers organization. And I did some digging around into an article from Prospects 1500, where all 3 of these guys were labeled as tier 3 level players, which means they have average expectations of making the majors and being a solid contributor. So obviously, like tier 2 is an above average expectation making the majors and being a solid contributor. Then tier 1 is like, you're going to make the majors, you're going to be an all-star. So I feel like tier 3 isn't bad, but it certainly isn't good. And when you look around the rest of the league, in the top 100 overall, so not just left-handed pitchers, there are 14 left-handed pitchers in the top 100 MLB pipeline list. 0 of those guys are Milwaukee Brewers. So does that make you question a little bit the quality of our left-handed prospects, or not so much?
The fact that there's only 14 left-handed pitchers in the top 100 in the entire league makes me feel okay with the fact that, even our best isn't on there. We know our farm system isn't great. Now, I think that it's time to start. You still want to win now with Christian Yelich, but I think you can start building up that system a little bit. I think the move with Leo Crawford and Corey Knebel is kind of showing you that, there's ways that they can still try to build this up. And I think that's what David Stearns and the Brewers are trying to do. Um, I still am pretty excited about these players, even if they're, not in the MLB top 100. They're not, or they're that tier 3, as you were talking about. If all 3 of these players make the majors and have even, middle relief roles or, number 4 or 5 starter roles and are solid in their roles, that's a win. And you're never going to be upset with just like solid role players, no matter what sport you're looking at, whether it be pitching, hitting, you go into football, you always need that rotational defensive lineman and all of those different things. So to me, it's not like I expected these guys to be number 1 starters, but having solid prospects that have a pretty good chance of getting into the majors and actually making an impact. At least it's not below average. At least our 3 best are not below average in getting to the MLB and making an impact. So to me, knowing where the Brewers organization is currently, it doesn't really surprise me. It also doesn't really make me think less of these players. I still am very hopeful for them. And things like this, I don't know for sure about MLB Pipeline, but a lot of times things like this are completely wrong because you look at where players are drafted, people are wrong all of the time, no matter what sport we're talking about. Isaiah Thomas with the last pick of the draft in the NBA, Tom Brady at 199 in that NFL draft. Like, there is constantly things that the scouts get wrong, and players play better than what everyone thinks they will. And at this point, that's what you got to hope for the Brewers is these pitchers, and a lot of our prospects can do that. That's not necessarily realistic, but that, for me, that is what prospects is for me to hope. I can talk about the Brewers team and what I see on the field and who's playing bad, who needs to play better, who's playing great, all those things. But when I look at prospects, I just look at what potential upside we could have. And with these 3 guys that we're talking about, that's a pretty big upside, I think.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, you mentioned prospect rankings always, not to like diss guys who have to try and do that, but they are wrong. I mean, Devin Williams was once labeled a tier 3 prospect, and he shattered MLB records this year, granted a shortened season, but obviously he outperformed those by a vast majority, and I fully expect him to keep doing that. As for if you go back to our last podcast, give that a listen, by the way, we kind of talked about the Brewers should use these left-handed pitchers as trade bait. If it's getting to the trade deadline and we just need something to push us over the edge, give us a little extra to compete for the division or a wild card spot, whatever it may be, these guys have value, so you want them to be tradable. Well, you mentioned Angel Perdomo. I mean, yeah, I think he's still a very good trade candidate. I mean, he's hard-throwing lefty, just didn't have his command under his belt, especially this year in his limited MLB experience. Quentin Torres Costa, a lot of Brewer fans actually wanted him to be protected in this year's Rule 5 draft because they were worried about someone scooping him up. Didn't quite happen. Nick Bennett, another lefty, has been progressing through the minors. Obviously this year kind of halted him, but last pitched with the Timber Rattlers, put together a really successful season. Leo Crawford, who acquired from the Dodgers, not a top 30 prospect, but, good upside. A lot of people think he could potentially reach, the same kind of status what Ethan Small is, which is a number 3 or number 4 starter at their best. So, well, I do think, you look at it and be like, oh, maybe our left-handed pitchers aren't as good as we thought. I still think David Stearns can find a way to make these fit the team needs whenever that time comes about. So I love our left-handed pitching prospects. I hope we add some more of them. And I think we're right where we want to be right now in terms of amount. So I'm very pleased with it.
Yeah, I think so too. And you mentioned Quentin Torres Costa. I actually had no idea who that was. But I looked at his baseball reference numbers, and he seemed to struggle his first few years in professional baseball. And actually, no, he struggled in college. I was not paying attention. That's college at Hawaii. He did not have great numbers there. And, for his first few years actually in the professionals, not terrible. But you look back 2018, 2019, really starting to put it together a little bit. 2018, 1.31 earn run average. Very good there. Not a ton of innings pitched, 55 innings. Moving ahead to 2019, again, not really a lot of innings pitched, but around a 2 ERA for him there. But, I'd like to see a little bit more from him, a little bit more innings pitched. But the numbers look relatively solid for him. And if he continues to pitch that well, his worst season in the professionals for ERA has been 4.5. So if he continues to pitch this well, career 3.25, he continues to play that well. That's a player that we could definitely look at. And I understand why Brewers fans wanted him protected, because he's definitely up and coming a little bit too. And that's the crazy thing, right? I just mentioned, prospect lists, they're exciting, but they're not always right. And there's always some players that are off of those lists that might make an impact. And I think, Quentin Torres Costa is one. Leo Crawford, I think, is another one. I'd love to see kind of what happens with these prospects. It's something that continuing to monitor them throughout their progress in the minor leagues. And then obviously, if and when they make it to the majors, that's when we can really start getting excited and see what they actually have and what they can bring to this team. So that's what I'll be watching. As always, you just watch what you can and see what these guys got. I'm really, really excited to see Ethan Small. Tyler and I went and watched his debut for the Timber Rattlers. That was a lot of fun. And before we got on, I mentioned, the two other players that we were excited about at the Timber Rattlers are actually on this list as well. Now, they're not left-handed pitchers. Thomas Dillard, he's kind of a do-it-all in the minors so far. He's played catcher, first base, and also outfield. And then Max Lazar, I think is how you pronounce his last name, right-handed pitcher. He was the one that came in after Ethan Small and pitched the rest of the game and looked really, really good doing so. So it's always fun to kind of watch these guys. If you get a chance, if you're living in Wisconsin, to check out a Timber Rattlers game, it definitely is fun, learning the names and seeing them perform, especially if they're names and they're on that, top 30 prospect list.
Oh, man, you just made me think of the good old days when we could go to a baseball game. I remember that game because I was in charge of buying our tickets, and I bought tickets for the wrong date. So we're like, okay, let's just, we'll buy them at the box office when we get there. And we're standing in line, and that guy gives us 2 free tickets on the third base side and then gives us his drink coupons. I was like, yeah, this is perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually forgot about that. But yeah, that was definitely awesome. I don't know why we were picked out of the crowd, because there was a line there. I don't know if we were just the last ones in line or what the case was, but yeah, that was definitely awesome and definitely a memorable time. And the fact that we got to watch 3 of these players and we're excited about them at that time, that's what this is about, right? And we're really hoping we get to see those guys very, very soon.
Oh, most certainly. I will leave you with the prospect I am most looking forward to, and that's Antone Kelly. The guy in high school was throwing in the low 90s, and then he added 20 pounds to his 6'6" frame, and now consistently operates 94 to 97. In his prime, is projected to reach back to triple digits. So, bring in the heat from the left-handed side. That would be awesome to see him come up and do that.
He's only 21 years old. Jeez, oh my gosh, he's barely older than my younger brother. What the? See, this is the problem with having a podcast, Tyler. This is the problem, because I look at these guys that are 4, 5, 6, 7 years younger than me, and gonna make millions and millions of dollars, and it just makes me feel like shit.
Well, one day when they realize, hey, remember that Brewers Trilogy podcast that talked about me so highly? Let's give them a shout out, and then we become rich and famous. So there's the dream.
That's the dream. You heard it here, Antone Kelly.
All right, well, that'll wrap us up here for our Brew Crew Tuesday. Be sure to stay tuned to our YouTube channel. We're coming out with Packers film breakdowns, Fear the Deer Friday, and we normally post our full-length podcast on there as well. So check all of it out, and we'll see you later, Brewer fans.
Trust in Stearns.